Hello learners, this is Habiba with Excel with me. If you like the video, please do like, share, subscribe and comment below. Let's start today's class, that is research in education, with the topic testing of hypothesis type 1 and type 2 errors. Now let's understand once again, already I have explained about this hypothesis testing. Let's revise before understanding about type 1, type 2 errors. Now hypothesis testing, an act in statistics whereby an analyst tests an assumption regarding a population parameter. Obviously, when we take a problem, research problem, we have to state the objectives. Along with objectives, we will also frame the hypothesis, that is tentative solution to our problem. So this testing of hypothesis is an act of statistics, where we apply statistics for the tests and whatever assumptions regarding our population parameters, we will test those things through the methods, maybe quantitative methods like mean, median, central tendency or standard deviation we can use. The methodology employed by the analyst depends on the nature of the data used and the reason for the analysis. Obviously, what kind of data we are using, what kind of testing we have to do, what kind of data should be treated, that is very important. Now, this hypothesis testing is used to assess the plausibility of a hypothesis by using sample data. Obviously, when we take the sample data, suppose we have given some questionnaires to the subject, we will bring those questionnaires and we will sort it out with the statistics, and then we will test our hypothesis. Now, how hypothesis testing works? An analyst tests a statistical sample with the goal of providing evidence on the plausibility of the null hypothesis. Obviously, when we are having already tentative solutions like null hypothesis, what we do, we will use statistical sample to provide the evidence. Then statistical analysts test a hypothesis by measuring and examining a random sample of the population being analyzed. All analysts use random population sample to test two different hypotheses. Already we understood these in the previous classes, the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. Now let's see 4 steps of hypothesis testing here. All hypotheses are tested using a 4-step process. Let's see those 4 steps. Number 1, the first step is for the analyst to state the 2 hypotheses so that only one can be right. Then the next step is to formulate an analysis plan which outlines how the data will be evaluated. The third step is to carry out the plan and physically analyze the sample data. Then the fourth and the final step is to analyze the results and either reject the null hypothesis or state that the null hypothesis is plausible given the data. So these are the 4 steps. What is the first step? What does this researcher or analyst state? 2 hypotheses, so that one can be right or both can be right. That can happen. Then the next step, we will analyze what is the plan which outlines how to treat the data, how to calculate the data. That is very important. Statistical methods we will use in that. The third one is the plan. Physically we will carry out the things with the sample data, whatever sample data to be converted or what statistics to be used, everything is done here. And the final step, what we will do, we will analyze the result with the hypothesis, whether it is right or we can accept or reject. Now, real world example of hypothesis testing, let's see here. If for example a person wants to test that a penny has exactly a 50% chance of landing on heads. Suppose we are taking a coin or a penny and we will throw in the air. What happens? We will have the pre-assumption that 50% chance can be heads or tails. The null hypothesis would be that 50% is correct, and the alternative hypothesis would be that 50% is not correct. So, null hypothesis, a type of statistical hypothesis that proposes that no statistical significance exists in a set of given observation. So, in null hypothesis, what happened? Let me explain with one example here. If I have taken the problem as there is what is the effect, to understand the effect of emotional intelligence on academic achievement, if I have stated. So, what could be my null hypothesis here? There will be no significance difference in the emotional intelligence of the secondary school students. There will be no significance difference in the academic achievement of secondary school students. There is no significance difference between emotional intelligence and academic achievement of secondary school students. I can create those null hypotheses. So, hypothesis testing is used to assess the credibility of a hypothesis by using sample data. Obviously, we will use the sample data to check whether our hypothesis is tested properly or not. Sometimes referred to simply as the null. It is represented as H0. Then what is a type 1 error here? Let's understand. When one rejects the null hypothesis, H0 default state of being, given that H0 is true. When the result is true and we are rejecting it, that is type 1 error, also known as alpha. In an investigator rejects a null hypothesis that is actually true, it is also called as false positive. When it is actually true, if we are rejecting it, that means we are making a type 1 error. Now, what is a type 2 error? When one fails to reject or accepts the null hypothesis when it is actually false or does not hold good. Reverse of the type 1, that is, we are accepting the null hypothesis when it is false, also known as beta error. The investigator fails to reject a null hypothesis that is actually false, also called as false negative. So, let's see the examples here. Type 1 error, the test result says you have coronavirus, but you actually don't. So, this is type 1. Type 2 error, the test result says you don't have coronavirus, but actually you do. So, understanding the difference between type 1 and type 2 errors can help you make more informed decisions about how to use statistics in your research. Now, let's see in a table, and we will wind up here. Type 1 and type 2 errors in hypothesis testing. Reject null hypothesis, that is null hypothesis is true. What happens here? Type 1 error, false positive. Then fails to reject null hypothesis, correct outcome, that is true negative. Here null hypothesis is false, then reject null hypothesis, correct outcome, that is true positive. And type 2 error, that is fail to reject null hypothesis, that is type 2 error, false negative. So we come to the end of this session. If you like the video, please do like, share, subscribe and comment below. Thanks for your attention and time. Happy learning.